Initially, I thought that the Anaconda will have the lowest DPS, but I was wrong. The Anaconda actually has a very similar damage profile as the Vazago, so this ship actually has higher DPS than the villain and higher DPS than the Astarte. So let's quickly take a look at this ship's stats. Now, the Vazago has a bonus on both the rockets and turrets, basically a 10% bonus, and this ship has a very similar bonus, 75% on turrets and 10% on missiles. Now, I noticed that the missiles on the faction carriers are performing really well. In some cases, I would say that they're performing much better than the turrets. So, since this is a Gurista pirate ship, and since they're known to be very good ships with missiles and very good ships with drones, I will be using mostly the missile lightweight ships on this ship. Basically, if I want to maximize its damage, I will go for the missile lightweight ships, and I already have a decent setup here. Now, as for the other modules, I did use this ship with extenders, but I will swap the build back into the classic build that I usually do. Now, this ship also gets a bonus on shield resistance, but in this case, I have the DPS rigs. Now, all of the three carriers that I did show here basically use the same rig setup, and with this ship I will also play around with the high tier experimental hangar mod just to see what's the damage output going to look like. Now, surprisingly, the DPS on the Anaconda and on the Vazago is actually about the same, which is to be expected because they both have about the same stats. However, the Vazago can have good DPS with turrets and missiles, while if you want to have best possible DPS on this ship, I would recommend that you use the lightweight ships with missiles. Now, as for the as for the implants, the bombard implant is basically the way to go, and the general units are for shield tanks. You can basically use the units that you need. However, if you go with the large Nosferatu or neutralizer, capital Nosferatu and neutralizer, they will not work against subcapitals, so that is something to keep in mind. So, let's see the active stats of this ship. Now, I actually really like the hull design of the Anaconda. It's a very good looking ship indeed. So, surprisingly, the game did remember my layout from last time. 4.9 million hit points, almost 5 million hit points, and decent stats on the shield. Lowest resistance on EM, which is to be expected from shields. 6.3 million hit points with the carry damage mode active, and 9071.04 DPS, which is about the same as the Vazago, which is very interesting. Now, this ship doesn't have any damage control bonuses, so you basically have 13 seconds with the damage control. But you have almost 19 million hit points, which is the highest value that we have seen so far with a DPS built on the faction carriers, which is very interesting. So you get good DPS and you get a pretty solid tank with this carrier. Now, of course, with the drone bombs you can triple your DPS for a short amount of time, but unfortunately it still does not show the actual DPS, but it should be 150% higher than the DPS that's shown on the fitting window. Well then, let's yeet
Autopilot
this ship
engaged.
into a mission,
Destination
and
reached.
of course you can't warp with the carrier mode active. I always forget that, which is a big mistake. Don't forget that you can't warp. Can be very critical at one point. Where is the deserted field? There it is. Let's warp. So, I have the theory that the missile lightweight ships perform much better than the turret lightweight ships, and if that is true, then this ship should be clearing that anomaly, clearing that mission very quickly.
Warp drive
So
active.
I'm kind of excited to see what's the result going to look like. If it ends up clearing very fast, in some cases, I would probably expect it to clear faster than the villain. Then this might be the highest DPS faction carrier, which is interesting because the Gurista pirate ships, at least the other ones, are not really known to have high DPS. They're mostly known to have a very good tank, but if this ship ends up clearing this very quickly, then that's going to be a very interesting change.
We're under attack.
And of course, I will be trying
We're
out
under
the other hangar mod, the high tier one, just to see how it will work. Now with bombers, we have found out last time that if you want the best DPS, then you will equip bombers, and surprisingly, the high tier hangar mod is giving lower DPS than the lower tier hangar mod. Now at least that was the case with the villain. With the Vazago it would be about the same, because the Vazago has it has basically the same bonus on both turret and missile lightweight ships. So basically, if you want maximum possible DPS, then you should go with the lightweight ships that your ship has the highest bonus on. So that means if this ship has a 10% per skill level bonus on missile lightweight ships, I will probably go with missile lightweight ships. Meanwhile, it has a 7.5% bonus on turrets, which means if you have turret ships, the bonus will be 2.5% lower. And I believe in the end that it does affect the final DPS quite a bit. Now, since this is a Gurista pirate ship, and I already have lightweight ships that use missiles, it's kind of interesting because you still are kind of using missiles and drones, although the missiles and drones have been basically integrated, so it doesn't really go far from the Gurista pirate ships in terms of their unique performance and their unique build. They are known to be using drones and missiles, and with the carrier here you basically have the drones and missiles combined into the lightweight ships. A very interesting mechanic, to be honest. Now, as expected, these ships just simply cannot dent the shield on this thing. This thing is really tanky, and with a good build you can easily withstand a lot of DPS. You should be able to survive a big fleet easily. Of course, if you have a full tank build, then this is one of those ships that's basically nearly immortal if you have a capital Logi, the
Enemy
force
ships
auxiliary
detected.
structure on your side. Now I
We
have
are
seen
under attack.
one kill, one Anaconda loss basically, and
We're under
that ship
attack.
didn't have any active shield boosters, which is interesting. Now that is the Anaconda that got killed, basically blue tackled in a special site, so there was basically nowhere to run, and by what I've been told, the whole alliance turned on that. Uh, the whole alliance started to basically blast that carried. So that was very unfortunate loss that I have seen. I think most of you have seen that Anaconda kill by now. Now, what really happened, I have no idea. I'm just telling you what I have been told. Could be false, could be the truth. Can't really verify that, so that's basically what I know. But one thing happened for certain. One of these ships has been destroyed. Now, the build looked like a passive shield tank, which means that they were definitely in a fleet with force auxiliary ships. That's why they didn't have any shield booster on their own, which is a big mistake because always have shield boosters on your ships. Now, in some cases, if you can trust your corp or alliance, then going full trunk, full adaptive build, basically passive tank, with a force auxiliary is a good idea, because that way you will basically be immortal. You will have 98, 99% resistance, and with a tank build, yeah, uh, anything shooting at you will do about 1% of their original damage, which means you are going to be able to tank a lot of incoming damage, including multiple dreadnoughts, with a high level implant, because in the end they can have, like, I don't know, 50,000 DPS. They will be doing only 500 DPS on your ship with a pretty good tank build, and this is where this ship shines. Now, of course, that is from a PvP perspective, but if you like to run missions, or, well, I say missions, but I'm also talking about encounters and anomalies, special sites in null, then you probably will be looking for a bit more DPS. So this ship with the current layout has about 9,771 DPS, and this is the build that uses the bombers and one destroyer. Now, all of these ships use missiles, and I am honestly impressed by its performance. Shockingly, it appears to be clearing everything a little bit faster than the Vazago. Now, here is the catch.
Enemy
Here is
ships
a big
detected.
catch.
Warp drive
If you
active.
equip the Vazago with the same lightweight ships, because the Vazago has a bonus on turrets and missiles, basically a same bonus, you can get the same DPS and you can get the same clear time. So Vazago and the Anaconda currently are the top faction carriers in terms of DPS. And here I quickly swapped to the destroyer. Yeah, now I will have 4 destroyers, and it will be interesting to see what's the DPS going to look like. It will be interesting to see what's the overall performance going to look like. Now, I personally think that it's going to be about the same. I expect the DPS to be a little bit lower. And yes, the DPS is actually a little bit lower, 6,334.43. Well then, that's a very interesting result. However, how do these ships apply the damage? That's also the question, because don't forget, the bombers use, I believe they are using the large torpedoes. Depends what hull it's used for the lightweight ship. It could be medium torpedoes, but it could be large ones. So let's say, I think the stats look like large torpedoes, but I might be wrong. Let's say medium torpedoes, just so if I make a mistake, then the mistake is going to be a lot less than if I say that they're using the large torpedoes. So, they're using large torpedoes. And the destroyers are using small missiles. Now the small missiles have much better application than the medium torpedoes or large torpedoes. So technically speaking, I should be applying more damage to the target. Of course, on paper I have lower DPS, but perhaps there's a chance that the higher damage application will in fact return as having higher damage done to the target. Now, the bombers, I feel like the bombers already had pretty decent damage application, which means that they're probably using the medium torpedoes. But the medium torpedoes should not have the same missile stats as the small missile launchers. 8,265.30 DPS, which is honestly quite a bit lower. About 850 DPS lower, which should technically be able to, you should be able to notice the difference. It's not that much, but at the same time, I've played this game long enough to feel any fluctuation in DPS. Now, these things wreck, as you can see. They are taking those ships apart one by one. And I can tell you, it's very difficult for me to actually feel the difference in terms of DPS between the bombers and the destroyers. I would actually say that by the way it works at the moment, I would say that the destroyers are actually doing a better job at the moment. I mean, just look at how quickly I just wiped those ships out. This is a little bit insane. Yeah, I believe that they are applying much more damage now. Now it's lower paper DPS, but the applicable damage will be a lot higher. And that's a very interesting little thing, because now with this rig, while the DPS on paper is lower, your clear time might actually go up, because you are in fact doing more damage to the target. And with the destroyers, you will not suffer against small targets. You will do a lot of damage against small targets. You will do a lot of damage against medium-sized targets, and, well, by the looks of it, you are going to be doing a lot of damage to the big targets as well. So it is a win on basically all fronts with the destroyers, which wasn't the case with the villain. With the villain, I had more DPS with the cheaper rig. Ironically, the villain has 7.5% bonus on missiles, while it has a 10% bonus per skill level on turrets. But the missiles on the villain did work better than the turrets. With the destroyer fleet, I had lower DPS and lower clear time than with the bomber plus destroyer, despite the fact that the ship had, and the ship has, more more a skill bonus on turrets.
Enemy
Honestly,
ships
a
detected.
very interesting results. I did not expect that.
We're under attack.
You know, I expected the blasters basically because blasters, even on the stars, they have ridiculously high DPS. So I expected them to have much more paper DPS because of the fact that blasters are by default high DPS weapons. But the stars are actually using the long range railguns. So I got trolled by the game. That's why it did not have the expected DPS. If you could build the lightweight ships to use blasters, I'm fairly sure the villain would be pushing about, I would say, 11,000 to 15,000 cold DPS, because that's just the DPS that it would get if I had access to the blasters on the stars. But the stars are actually using the rifled railguns, the longer blasters, the long range blasters, so their DPS will be lower. But if you go with the bombers basically are using the same weapons across the board. So with the bombers, you basically get the same weapon, and in most cases, you get about the same DPS. The difference in DPS will be from the skill per level bonus on the ships. Now, as I'm talking, I noticed that I think this is the fastest clear time that I've ever done so far with the ships. This is going to be a shorter video than usual. Usually takes me about 35-40 minutes to clear this. Now we are at 22 minutes. And this is the last wave with the last 10 ships. This thing is a monster. So, I think I will be able to give you a very accurate answer on these ships. If you're looking for DPS or tank, or basically, I think I might be able to help you to decide which one of these ships to get, depending on what type of purpose you want the ship to have. So, if you like to clear missions, if you like high DPS, the Vazago and surprisingly, the Anaconda is the way to go. Because with the Anaconda or the Vazago, you can basically pick the missiles, the missile lightweight ships, and the missile lightweight ships seem to be doing really well. At least it looks like they're doing much better than the third ones. So if you want to have high DPS, then the DPS build with the rocket ships is definitely going to work. However, if you like PvP, then the Astarte or Villain are a good option. The Astarte because it can kill the capacitors of subcapitals, which is very important, and the Astarte will basically be spelling doom for subcapital fleets. The
Warp
Villain,
drive active.
with its fantastic webs, is also going to be pretty lethal. Doesn't matter if you're using missiles or turrets on the villain, you can apply the damage really well because of the webs. You slow down the target, and if the target is slow, then well, your ships will be doing a lot of damage. However, you can do PvP or PvE with any of these ships. It all depends what type of build you have, and from my personal experience, these ships are definitely fun. With time, they will be improved even more. We still expect to see some form of lightweight ship drone damage amplifier. That's a name that I gave to the module that is still not released, that still doesn't exist, but it should be called something along those lines.
Docking
And
request accepted.
if you have, a carrier or two just laying around, an extra carrier alongside your Imperial carrier, then you can have both a faction carrier and a Imperial carrier. You can have both of them. Doesn't have to be. You don't have to sacrifice your main ship to get one of these ships. After all, both have different purpose. Both are fun to fly ships, and in the end, if you have one, then if you have a carrier just laying around, then you can easily just use that carrier as material and get one of these monsters. So with that being said, I really hope that I could help you decide which one of these ships to get, and I really hope that I could help you at building the ship, or at least giving you an idea on how to build your own ship. And with that being said, I love you all, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.